The Cypriot National Guard, also known as the Greek Cypriot National Guard or simply as National Guard, is the combined arms military force of the Republic of Cyprus. This force consists of air, land, sea and special forces elements, and is highly integrated with its first and second line reserves, as well as supporting civilian agencies and paramilitary forces. Greece currently maintains a garrison in the Republic of Cyprus under the designation ELDYK, Hellenic Force in Cyprus, but this is not officially part of the Cyprus military and primarily serves as a NATO regimental-level influence for training and support of the National Guard. History. The National Guard was established in 1964 as a force composed predominantly of ethnic Greeks, following the 1963–1964 breakdown of social and political relations between Greek and Turkish Cypriots on the island of Cyprus, as outlined by the Tripartite Treaty of Alliance and defined by the early Constitution of 1960–1963. Cyprus was entitled to an army of 2,000 men, to be made up of 60% Greek and 40% Turkish personnel. The first elected president of the Republic of Cyprus, Archbishop Makarios III, proposed 13 constitutional amendments to the 1960 Constitution, which would have a just distribution of manpower and voting power for all civil and military services. This adjustment was aimed at giving greater representation and influence to the Greek Cypriot majority, which at the time formed around 82% of the island's indigenous population. Operational history. The Cypriot National Guard has been involved in multiple combat operations, all within Cyprus territory. In 1964, Cyprus and Turkey engaged in direct confrontation during the Battle of Tilleria, as a result of civil warfare between indigenous Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. Greek Cypriot forces entered the Turkish enclave of Kokina in an effort to eliminate a Turkish beachhead, resulting in almost 2 weeks of fighting. In 1974, Turkey invaded Cyprus, intervening against a military coup by the Cyprus National Guard in Nicosia. The invasion resulted in 2 concentrated Turkish offensives and 1 dispersed Greek Cypriot counteroffensive. Within 1 month, Turkish forces had captured 38% of the island's northern area, succeeding in bisecting Nicosia and taking Kyrenia, Morphou and Famagusta. Cypriot National Guard forces, supported by a smaller number of Greek troops, were only able to prevent the loss of Nicosia International Airport and the Kato-Pyrgos corridor during the Second Turkish Offensive. In 1978, Egyptian commando forces raided Larnaca International Airport in an effort to seize a hijacked Greek Cypriot airliner. Greek Cypriot commando and paramilitary forces resisted the Egyptian forces, resulting in a sustained gun battle with the death of 12 Egyptian commandos and 3 Egyptian Air Force aircrew. Conscription. Currently, only Greek Cypriots serve in the military. Legally, the Greek Cypriot community comprises the ethnic Greek population as well as Cypriots belonging to 3 Christian minorities: the Armenians, Latin Rite Catholics and Maronites. Since 2008, service is mandatory for all members of the Greek Cypriot community and not only for ethnic Greeks. The current Supreme Commander is a Greek military commander, as have been all of his predecessors. Military service in the Republic of Cyprus is mandatory for males. The minimum obligatory service period is 24 months. All male visitors to the island of military age who have a father of Cypriot extraction are required to obtain an exit visa from a defense ministry office. As of 2016, conscripts with a Cypriot mother and a foreign father, even if they do not have the Cypriot nationality, will have to do the full service of 24 months. Under the same rules, those born to a foreign mother and Cypriot father and who gained nationality through the father have to do the full service. The House Defense Committee passed this new law in order to avoid being penalized by the European Court of Human Rights. Camouflage Patterns. Cypriot National Guard. Cypriot National Guard pattern standard issue. Similar to woodland but with different colors to match the environment. Cypriot National Guard, Cyprus Air Force's variant of the CNG pattern. Similar to standard issue but includes a bright blue color. Greek lizard pattern. It has been coming out of use since the introduction of the CNG pattern. Special Forces Command, MARPAT Woodland. Special Forces Command, ACU Universal Camouflage Pattern. Special Forces Command, CLEAX Snow Camouflage. Underwater Demolition Command, US Woodland. Ground Component. Current organization. The main body of the Cypriot ground forces is made up by 2 infantry divisions, 3 infantry brigades, 1 armored brigade and 1 support brigade. 1st Infantry Division, 2nd Infantry Division, 4th Infantry Brigade, 20th Armored Brigade, 3rd Support Brigade, 7th Infantry Brigade, 8th Infantry Brigade. Artillery Command. Military Police. Special Forces Command. Early operational history. The Cypriot National Guard, in its existent form, was initially mobilized circa mid-1963 as a Greek Cypriot infantry force with some small elements dedicated to artillery, anti-armor and light armor forces. This force inherited some mixed equipment from its pre-Civil War organization, including 54 British-made 25-pounder gun howitzers, 40 Marmon Harrington armored car, 4 Shoreland light armored cars, 2 Daimler Dingo light armored cars, 5 C-17 light armored trucks, and a variety of machine guns, mortars and a few anti-tank weapons. The Greek Cypriots also possess some Bofors 40mm anti-aircraft guns, along with a variety of Bedford trucks and old US-made Jeeps. The military confrontation at Kokina in August 1964 between Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot forces saw the Greek Cypriot force mobilized for the first time to attempt to eliminate a fortified coastal enclave in the Tilia region of the island, in an effort to stop Turkish vessels putting ashore to offload food, weapons and ammunition for the Turkish Cypriot militia units active in that region. The attempted siege of Kokina began on the 6th of August and ended on the 9th of August after 2 days of daylight airstrikes by the Turkish Air Force around Kokina and neighboring Kato Pyrgos, having sustained manpower and material losses as a result of these airstrikes. The Cypriot National Guard pulled back slightly and solidified a perimeter of containment around Kokina, leaving the Turkish Cypriot village isolated from the rest of the island, and buffered only a narrow UN demilitarized zone. Aware of the glaring deficiency of the military capabilities, the leadership of the Cypriot National Guard under General George Grivas was able to compel the civilian government of Cyprus, under Archbishop Makarios, to seek out foreign assistance for a massive armament campaign. Since Cyprus could not afford major weapons purchases under her own depleted national budget, Makarios was forced to dispatch an envoy on the 1st of October 1964 to the Soviet Union to request military assistance. This move resulted in rapid Soviet assistance, widely regarded by Western countries as a step towards a Cold War alliance between Cyprus and Russia. As soon as 23 23–24 December 1964, a Russian Navy freighter arrived at Limassol port carrying the first batch of arms intended to re-equip the National Guard. These supplies included 4 unidentified armored vehicles and 130 ZIL heavy trucks, along with sufficient number of crates to fill 36 Bedford trucks. After this initial delivery, arms transfers made by the Russian Navy to Cyprus accelerated, with freighters traveling via Alexandria in Egypt to Limassol under cover of night. These deliveries included a full package of Soviet-made radars and radio systems to complement the structural and strategic requirements of a reinforced National Guard. In addition, a consignment of 32 Soviet-made T-34 85ths medium tanks were delivered along with 40 BTR-152 armored personnel carriers, as well as a batch of 30 M194 for 100 mm light field howitzers, 40 modern 3M6 Schmel anti-tank missile firing units, a batch of ZPU-1 14.5 mm anti-aircraft guns and a consignment of around 4,500 Czech surplus AK-47s, as well as machine guns and mortars. After 1965 and until 1974, the civilian government of Archbishop Makarios became increasingly alienated by the relationship between the National Guard leadership and the ruling military government of Greece. Few funds were made available to secure other armaments of technical support, and the National Guard was forced to develop alternative means to armament and self-sustainment. A technical corps was established to produce and retrofit a series of improvised armored vehicles from unneeded -712 Austrian shillings Soviet tractors, resulting in 10 locally produced TS armored personnel carriers. A lack of spare parts meant that by the time of the 1974 military coup against Archbishop Makarios, the National Guard was experiencing severe technical difficulties with its T-34 tanks. The problem for the National Guard was further compounded by the refusal of Makarios' loyalist paramilitary force to hand over some 4,500 Czech automatic rifles and a variety of other weapons which had been kept at a warehouse near Nicosia Airport, and which were handed over to the UN in January 1972. Coup and invasion in 1974. On the 15th of July 1974, the Cypriot National Guard, under its own leadership and in conjunction with the EOKAB ultra-nationalist organization, overthrew the civilian government of Archbishop Makarios in Nicosia and attempted to assassinate him by using tanks and infantry to storm the presidential palace. Makarios escaped, but the confrontation in Nicosia resulted in multiple casualties as the National Guard units engaged in a gunfight with Makarios' loyalist forces. Since Kyrenia in the north of the island was not expected to present much armed resistance to the coup, many forces which were stationed there to fend off a threatened Turkish invasion were sent to Nicosia on 15 and 16 July to enforce the coup in the capital. Kyrenia was thus poorly defended when the Turkish invasion began on the 20th of July. On the 20th of July 1974, Turkey commenced an air and sea invasion of northern Cyprus, under the codename Attila I, which had the anticipated aim of seizing Kyrenia as a beachhead with amphibious forces, whilst simultaneously establishing a beachhead from Kyrenia to the northern suburbs of Nicosia using parachute forces. The attack was heavily supported by a daylight air campaign, allowing Cypriot AA flak to be suppressed to the extent that Turkish transport planes could drop parachute forces north of Nicosia in broad daylight from the 20th of July to the 23rd of July. In disarray, the Greek Cypriot military leadership enacted the Aphrodite II defense plan to coordinate a containment and resistance to the invasion forces. This plan, however, proved to be ineffective in either containing or repelling the Turkish forces already ashore. At the same time, the Greek Cypriot EOKAB forces, subordinate to their own de facto leadership, enacted their own interpretation of the existing Aphrodite defense plan and attacked multiple Turkish Cypriot enclaves simultaneously, causing heavy Turkish Cypriot non-combatant casualties and rounding up an estimated 20,000 Turkish Cypriot PAS who were interred at Limassol until later that year. Post-war revival. Immediately following the 1974 conflict, the Cypriot National Guard experienced a major depletion of its military capability due to lack of equipment and ammunition, compounded by the wartime economic collapse of the country. A small armored unit of 11 surviving T-34 85th tanks continued to operate in service until circa 1985, albeit in poor mechanical condition with lack of spare parts. Small numbers of other armored vehicles and artillery guns from the pre-war period also continued in service until the economic revival of the Cyprus Republic in the mid-1980s. In the early 1980s, Cyprus sought new supplies of arms in order to circumvent US and European embargoes, combined with an apparent unwillingness by the Soviet Union to supply further aid. From Brazil, a large consignment of new light armored vehicles was ordered in 1982, in the form of 10 E-11 Urutu armored personnel carriers, 36 E-3 Jararaga armored reconnaissance vehicles, and 126 E-9 Cascavel armored fighting vehicles. Faced with an urgent need for infantry portable air defense equipment, the Cypriot government was able to procure 20 firing units of SDR-ELA-2 SA-7B Grail anti-aircraft missiles along with 324 live rounds from neighboring Syria in 1984. Major arms orders were also placed with France, one of the few European powers still willing to support weapon deliveries to Cyprus. In 1984, Cyprus purchased from France a total of 27 VABVCI infantry fighting vehicles with 20mm cannon along with 100 VABVTT armored personnel carriers. In 1987, the first batch of new French tanks were purchased to replace the T-34s that had been removed from service. A total of 15 AMX-30B2 main battle tanks and 1 AMX-30D recovery vehicle, all delivered the following year. Also in 1987, Cyprus purchased from France a unit of 6 SA-342 Elghazel Scud anti-tank helicopters and 18 VABVCAC guided missile tank destroyers, along with 1,200 Hawk-2 anti-tank missiles, all delivered in 1988. A further 2 VABVTT armored personnel carriers were ordered as options in 1987 along with 250 Milan 2 anti-tank missile rounds and an unknown number of firing units. In 1989, the Cyprus government ordered a batch of 35 AMX-30B2 main battle tanks and 1 AMX-30D armored recovery vehicle as part of a $115 million US dollar purchase from France. The deal included 12 GI-80 F-3 self-propelled 155mm howitzers and 12 AMX-VCI armored personnel carriers. All of the equipment ordered from France in this year was delivered from 1,991. In 1990, Greece supplied Cyprus with 81 ELV Leonidas II armored personnel carriers, which were fielded to provide the Greek ELDYK army regiment in Cyprus with a mechanized infantry vehicle force. These were followed in 1996 to 1998 by a batch of 52 French-made AMX-3 OB main battle tanks supplied from Hellenic army surplus, along with a further 65 new Leonidas II armored personnel carriers delivered in 1996–1997. Naval component. Early operational history. The Cyprus Naval Command became active circa 1963, following the outbreak of civil conflict between extremists within the Greek and Turkish ethnic communities of the island. At the outset of operational status, the Cyprus Naval Command was manned by Greek Navy officers and junior officers, whilst the sailors were primarily Greek Cypriot conscripts of educated backgrounds. The first equipment made available to the Cyprus Naval Command was a set of 3 ex-German WW2-era R-boats. All 3 vessels were in service by August 1964, having been purchased from a shipyard in Piraeus, Greece by a private sponsor named A. Levantis. The 3 vessels were in poor condition due to their age, and had to be refurbished in Greece before delivery to Cyprus. On 6 August 1964, the Cypriot National Guard was mobilized to intervene in the ongoing inter-ethnic confrontation at Kokina, a Turkish Cypriot-controlled fortified enclave on the southwestern edge of Morphou Bay in the northwest of the island. By this stage, the Cypriot National Guard was effectively a Greek Cypriot security force, which by virtue of its commander, General George Grivas, was subordinate to Athens and not to Nicosia. Kokina was regarded by Grivas as a major coastal beachhead for Turkey to land weapons in Cyprus with the aim of arming the Turkish Cypriots. For this reason, he persuaded the military government in Athens to authorize an all-out assault on Kokina, with the aim of eliminating the beachhead and preventing more weapons being delivered to Turkish Cypriot militia groups. As a necessity of mounting such an assault, Grivas required a naval presence off the coast of Kokina in order to bombard the enclave from the sea, and to prevent any other shipping from interfering. Consequently, the Phaethon and the Arion were utilized in the assault and commenced their assault with broadsides of 40 mm and 20 mm gunfire into the enclave on 6 August. This action was coordinated with battery fire from 6 land-based 25-pounder guns and around a dozen mortars used by ground forces to besiege the enclave from the south and southwest. The siege continued until the 8th of August, when the Turkish government opted to intervene with airstrikes. As it became clear to all parties that Kokina's defenses were likely to collapse, regardless of a UN presence in the area, the Turkish Air Force dispatched a number of formations of F-100 Super Sabres to commence airstrikes against the Cypriot ground and naval forces. In broad daylight and flying at low level, the first formation of F-100 Super Sabres spotted the Phaethon near to a small fisheries harbor west of Kokina. The Phaethon commenced evasive maneuvers and put up 20 mm cannon fire, but was struck in the engines by strafing rockets and exploded into flames, killing 7 of her crew. One of the 4 survivors then piloted the ship with a single functioning engine to run aground next to the harbor, so that the crew could be recovered by local fishermen. The Phaethon was then gutted by flames, rendering it a wreck. minutes after the attack on the Phaethon, a second formation of F-100s spotted the Cypriot gunboat Arion further up the coast towards Kokina. The Arion was strafed with guns and rockets, causing superficial damage. As the Arion successfully made her escape using evasive maneuvers, an F-100C Super Sabre piloted by CPT Sengue's total of 112 filo was shot down by a Cypriot 40mm anti-aircraft gun emplacement on the shoreline. The loss of the Phaethon was a severe shock to the National Guard leadership, and was compounded by further casualties and material losses at Kato Pyrgos, a nearby Greek Cypriot village which was bombarded on 8 and 9 August in an effort to dislodge National Guardsmen using its hilltops for directing artillery fire with radios. A scramble for arms featured prominently throughout 1964, as the Cypriot National Guard compelled the civilian government to solicit Soviet support. In early 1964, the Greek Cypriots acquired a large package of radars, communications and logistical support apparatus for SA-2F guideline surface-air missiles, and only a NATO blockade of Limassol in 1965 prevented the live missile rounds and the TELs from being delivered. With no effective air defense measure in place, the Greek Cypriots utilized the radars at one western and one eastern coastal mountain points in the Pitidactylos Mountains stretching across the north of the island. These radars provided both air and surface tracking capability for aircraft and shipping. In late 1964, it was reported that Greek Cypriot naval crews had been sent to Egypt to train on Soviet Kamar-class fast attack craft. Western media sources assumed that Cyprus was being prepared to receive Kamar-class vessels, although Cyprus eventually chose cheaper naval vessels in the form of 6 P-4 skinhead motor torpedo boats. In February 1965, the Cyprus Naval Command entered the 6 MTBs into service under the naval pennants 20-25, and the designations T1, -2, -3, -4, -5 and -6. These vessels were extremely fast and could be used to attack Turkish warships and landing vessels in littoral waters using a pair of 533mm torpedoes. In addition, each vessel mounted a twin 25mm general-purpose AA gun. These were all stationed at a purpose-built naval squadron base at Benghazi, named Base Chrysalis. In 1970, the P-01 Arion was renamed Levantis in honor of a private sponsor who paid for the refurbishment of the vessel. The Levantis was given the new pennant 15. Her sister ship, P-0300, was removed from the Navy list in 1971. At some point in 1973, the T-5 motor torpedo boat was removed from Navy lists and disarmed. She was stripped of useful materials, and left as a hulk at Naval Base Chrysalis. Around the same time, 3 Type 108 motor torpedo boats of unknown designation were delivered from Yugoslavia, but did not enter active service and were laid up at Benghazi. Just prior to the Turkish invasion of northern Cyprus in 1974, the Cyprus government ordered 2 Astrel 32L fast patrol boats from France. These were embargoed as a result of the conflict, and would be delivered to Greece instead in 1975. On the 15th of July 1974, EOKAB and elements of the Cyprus National Guard overthrew the legitimate president, Archbishop Makarios, and replaced him with Nikos Samson. Makarios escaped an initial attempt to capture him at the Archbishopric in Nicosia, and fled to Paphos. The naval patrol vessel Levantis was quickly dispatched to Paphos to begin shelling a radio station which was being operated by pro-Makarios elements. On 20 July 1974, Turkey invaded Cyprus in a surprise attack, without issuing a declaration of war. A naval force of Turkish vessels was detected by coastal radar at Apostolis Andreas approaching the coast, and a second force of naval vessels was sighted off the coast of Kyrenia during the early hours. The Cyprus National Guard Naval Command quickly ordered its two motor torpedo boats, T1 and T3, both based at Kyrenia, to attack the Turkish flotilla directly. Both vessels were promptly sunk by combined air and sea attack. The rest of the Cyprus Navy vessels were scuttled by their own crews at Naval Base Chrysalis in Benghazi on 14 August 1974. After the conflict, two boats were refloated by Turkish troops and transferred to Gölcük Naval Museum, Turkey.